Hello everyone, Happy New Year from Schwerpunkt. I hope you've had a terrific beginning of the new year. Today we talk a bit about what lies ahead and what we can do. And there were many of you that have subscribed to my channel in the last weeks, in the last months. It's an interesting growth. And the thought I have for you today really has to do with the moral forces that we speak of so much. We could be speaking about lots of different things in this regard. Honestly, today I was preparing two videos, right, that we'll make tomorrow, actually, and the day after, about the Thuringians, about World War the First tactics, right, trench attacks, assaults, and that is perhaps more interesting to you than my rambling about today's content. But I think it's important to start a new year, and especially this year, right? Because we have witnessed historically something, let's say, relatively unusual, that surely hasn't been pleasant, that has brought down many people. I addressed this in the Happy Holidays video, but of course I know it doesn't end there, right? It doesn't end by simply wishing you all the best, which I truly do. I don't mind who you are. I mean, we are all different. We all have different opinions. We'll probably be conflicting at some point. We have evidently something in common if you listen to my content. And of course, we all have a life that we know how hard can be. Some have it easier. I think I have a dramatically easy life, telling the truth. Others have it much worse, and the same reason why I can't sit here, for example, talking about this stuff and not worrying about so many things, despite I of course feel also for problems that I have that this pandemic has caused, right, directly or indirectly, and that will keep unfortunately being so. And this is the real problem, right? We can't wish each other the best, but the point here is also that we have to do something about it, right? I'm not here to give you a guide what we'll have to do this year, what we have to approach the pandemic like, the various epidemiological problems, and the broader political and social issues that at the end of the day are the ones that probably really influence us. I mean, not probably, but concretely, I mean, influence us the most. Aside from the, allegedly mathematical, statistical calculations that we know that the economical men do not actually follow, right? We are largely irrational beings in a sense, that we cannot modify that. But it's exactly here that moral forces stand, because at the end of the day, aside from the very important calculations and projections and planning that we can have, what really makes the difference in a concrete factors is not how much you speculate, how much you calculate, but how much you do, you actually do. It's not easy to do, right? We have tendentially a lazy nature. We tend to get discouraged easily as humans. I mean, and we try our best essentially only when we're brought under direct pressure. And the point though is that we can influence our minds in a way that can really be beneficial for ourselves in this artificial sense, right? We can prompt us to achieve things that instinctively we wouldn't mind about. And this is especially true when we have a very important aim, right? Something that makes us really think that will make it everything worth it. I mean, the sacrifice, the work, the application, all the things that we can measure on ourselves, right? That are at the end of the day the ones that make us work, right? I could bring there a lot of examples from history. I mean, I hope that Schwerpunkt makes this work. I mean, that Schwerpunkt shows how complicated the world is, how there is no easy solution to problems, how you cannot be seeking for precepts, but exactly doing the same exact contrary if you really want to have an effective life being lived. That is to say, you can follow certain guidelines, you can understand how the world works more or less, but the point is that at the end of the day, it gets down to what you are and what you do with this world in a contingent sense, right? Because we all have it differently. We all are in different contexts, in front of different challenges. So nobody can answer, right, for our own responsibility. We are the ones who decide. And this is crucial. I mean, empowering a person and developing the boosting the sense of entitlement about your own choices, and emphasizing the importance of your own choices, of your own deliberations, what you think is right or wrong at the moment. Doesn't matter whether it turns out to be, but still realizing that the only difference passes through what you actually do in this sense. And the question is endless, because once again you could point out a specific problem, try to solve it, but once again it stays always on you. I started this channel with different aims at this point. I mean, it's been fundamentally almost 3 years, and at the beginning I didn't post daily, but it turns out that throughout this time, the last years and a half, basically I began to post regularly once a day. There have been specific aside, I went a couple of times, even more in vacations, so of course I had my own, I think only twice or 4 times, I don't remember actually, so that I stopped posting daily. But for if you have followed me, you know what I've been through in the last years, and but I had to work basically every day consistently. That is very important. I mean, not to count your time, to have a pretty good depiction of what your concrete possibilities are, because without that, you can't really do much. But once you have, you can't plan, right? You can't be realistic about what you have to do. But eventually, when you have that, surprising yourself of how much you can practically do to even go beyond, right? This is, I don't know if you ever read, it's actually a classic of literature, The Tour of the World in 80 Days. And that's a hell of a book, and it's very moving in my opinion, because it shows you, aside from the context that, Vern's, for this time, modern and future-oriented mentality, scientific, it's essentially a scientific fiction in a sense, and not even so fictional. From Earth to Moon, for example, entails so much about for everybody who has read about the American Civil War, the developments in artillery in there. So those are the books that have to be read. But I've always found it very, very moving. Ever since I was a child, this idea that they had to make the history, that there was this bet, we'll make it to make an 80 days tour of the world, and being fundamentally in London. Starting from London, after 80 days, arriving there. And the fascinating aspect of that is that this geographical notion that fundamentally traveling always towards the east, because that was the path they take, they were essentially gaining a bit of time extra in the chronological aspect, because they were essentially advantaging themselves by always traveling towards the direction that, saying, catching up the Earth revolving, and to make it through these astonishing perils and adventures and so on, that they arrive 1 day late to London. So right, the worst, because they calculated those 80 days of their own travel, and instead they find out that they arrived in the city in time, actually, because by always traveling east, they had earned 1 day, that extra day that actually took the thing to be done, and they win the bet. And it's very moving because they didn't realize that, right? And that's a hell of a beautiful book, but also a great lesson and a true metaphor about the struggles of mankind in an era where the book takes place, where actually the world was wondering, right, what were the limits of technology, of modernity, of progress, right? What the next thing would bring to, and that's pretty consistent actually with that mindset, because it shows you at the end of the day that it's not even the means that bring you there, but fundamentally the the uncertainties of the journey that make you improve, even unconsciously through that time. And I like it to see it always like that, right? It's like when I started Schwerpunkt, I had literally no idea of what it would have been like in 3 years from then, right? I could have, I had certain things in mind. Of course, some were even better expectations, but the reality teaches you something that objectively you wouldn't like to make it to be otherwise, because it's a reality, right? That spark of truth that you can't find, the world that surrounds you, emerges ever more uh, the more you do, and the more you apply yourself. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy because once again there is too much we do not know, right? But it's just struggling, right, and pushing hard and working hard, that throwing yourself beyond the obstacle, that you can realize how all the consequences of this fundamentally are more important sometimes altogether than the single effort that you're trying to make, right? And will bring you to places that you wouldn't even know they exist. And to me, history is exactly this, right? History, studying history is not learning someone's thought by heart, taking side in terms of I'm of that faction or another, but fundamentally just widens not just the horizons, but literally, and more than that, the depth of reality. It makes you understand how much there is still unexploited, and how much it is, um, how what a waste it is fundamentally to simply sit there doing nothing and thinking that it's just theoretical, it's just speculation. Because at that point, before you actually get to know certain things, all what you have is speculation, because you objectively do not know where it can lead you. I think this is important for the future that lays ahead, because of course there are many people who think that, even if most of you are at least here do not think the same, because they like history and they understand the importance, the weight of it. But let's be honest, at least I can tell you as an example from my own experience. When I was younger, I loved history. I've always loved it, but I had no idea of what this concrete improvement could bring to. Right? I had, perhaps, ever since I knew about it, and ever since I realized that what I learned from history was not useful just for knowing the thing notionalistically, but actually to have such a greater perspective on things I lived every day, even as a kid, right? And that can seem strange, but at least for those who disbelieve it, that there is a it's as if this was a sort of fantasy world, right? Something on your own. There are many people who've also built fictional realities that prefer to live sometimes with this dimension that they find more within themselves, and they presume it's more important. I've never been open about this, but I can tell you, when I was younger, I actually was very versed in drawing, and not just in the technicality of it, but specifically I wanted to live like that, which is strange because in my family, I don't know, just some maybe musicist was there, but no actual artist in the sense of creator or painter, whatever. I drew an astonishing amount of stuff, really from a quantitative point of view. I mean, all the there's more than 900 videos they make on Schwerpunkt, gives you the quantitative dimension of how. But when I start doing something, I don't stop. I produce that much, and I like doing it. But sometimes it seems like such a huge waste of energy, right? And indeed, the thing is complex, because as far as my own sensitivity or imagination was involved, and I had a pretty damn good one, and I realized I have lost most of it. Um, even up to a recent age. I mean, like when I was in high school, I still had this great capacity. Remember, I drew comics, uh, caricatures, all this stuff. I was pretty damn good at it. I could have honestly started that path. Of course, I would have never done it, right? Given my background, it's not because my family would have imposed me anything or something, but myself, I told myself, this is not, what you should be doing. Today, I would have had a different idea, right? Probably, if, I had kids and someone manifested that capacity, I would encourage him or her to do it as I would say, who knows? Maybe that's really a thing. You would bet. I presume when you have children, you tend to become a great fan of them and to back them for sometimes, even too leniently. At least that's how I consider myself sometimes towards, as far as affections are involved, to pursue that path. But that's exactly, I would like to place a counter alter to this and to explain that yes, that can be a thing, but even if it can never come, or at least it loses a, an astonishing amount, if not a decisive amount, most of the times, of its potential, if it is not backed by an actual education. I mean, the pouring of so much information and the development of critical skill analysis and synthesis that can reinforce that. Right. In that case, if you are an artist, you like to draw, maybe studying history of art, history of literature, traveling, studying music, and even history, but even military history. I mean, everything. Right. It can't be even engineering. It doesn't even have, polymatic people tendentially are built in a way, right? It's not that they are born like that. And it turns out that, yes, I mean, our capacity to articulate our own intelligence is exactly what improves all the various branches at once, right? History has this incredible capacity of literally explaining each and every one of these branches. Like, it's not that history is history in itself. History, as we've repeated countless times, means literally the activity of research and nothing else, right? It doesn't even tell you whether you get to something, right? But if you ever wonder why that is so important, it's exactly because the research in itself brings more fruits as from a methodological and synthesis point of view than the actual product of it, than the that will come right along with it, hopefully. But let's assume you really find nothing. You search for a source. You believe that there is something out there. We never do it. I know scholars that have done certain things for a lifetime that naturally did also research something else in the meanwhile. But there can be even those failures, right? And that is also an important historical achievement in a sense. I mean, realizing that searching here and there, and having someone have it done before already is definitely incredible. But the point of history is that it's the more the way you look at reality than the actual way reality is. Because let's be honest, what is reality in practice, right? In practice, it is a lot, and there is no doubt. But if we were to explain how we interact with reality, the problem is that we have not the slightest idea. I mean, the answer is a secret, it's a mystery that is contained in our mind, and we still go on with things that apparently work, but just apparently in the sense that we're living right now, and we have been gullible enough to believe that reality is real, our existence is real, right? And we just go with it, and it's perfectly fine, right? That's how we have achieved so much, even just in historical perspective. But the question even here, some of you, I came up with, with the von Clausewitz thing, I emphasized even, and especially from my perspective, it came from a more structural, kind of material background, sometimes approach to history, the importance of the ideal side of the story, right? And some of you answered me recently, but the ideal side of the story will never beat the real one of the story. Are we sure about it? Because I'm deliberately crossing out the term materialism or excuse me, in this case, realism or idealism. But the question is, are we sure? Like we don't need both actually, or that nobody can tell which one is better, right? It's normal, especially when you're younger, to believe that, I don't know, it's either matter superior to spirit, or vice versa, right? Then you grow old, you start realizing, not because you actually have a certainty about it. That's exactly because you the more you know, the more you realize how the two things interplay constantly, and there's no way to even doesn't even make sense to distinguish the two things, right? But there can be cultural limits, in a sense, to this perspective, right? It's not a surprise, for example, in a way, why my background favored a bit more the structural or material-oriented interpretation, right? It's kind of it's product of multiple, if you want, even historiographical currents, scientific mindset. In the West, this does happen, right? Some of you recently asked me, I think even misunderstanding was trying to say at that point that, so don't you think that the problem is exactly the fact that we have given too much importance to the material side of the story in the West, specifically asking about the West? Exactly, right? That was, I think it was a von Clausewitz video, or a Clausewitz in theory video, and it was in the video was actually telling that I wasn't being open pretty much about the side of the West story. And on Schwerpunkt, I realized you follow me from different parts of the world, mostly the West, and mostly the United States, actually. But the point even here is realizing that this is a universal matter, right? It doesn't stop just to, we can have different backgrounds, we can all have this more unbalanced view, but it's something that pertains really to us in human terms more with you. And indeed, in the West, we do have this tendency, we do have this problem. It's something that began for reasons that date back maybe to positivism, but also that were reinjected to the to Marxist materialism that has somewhat taken over after World War II in many Western academies at so many levels. This idea that there has to be that socioeconomics is everything. It's actually politics and society. Right, socioeconomics is already giving a cut to reality that basically puts on the fore that economics is more important than anything else, right? Because it has to be first, right? Even my thesis recently was criticized because I was studying tactics, and one of the minor notes that was given by, incidentally, one of the professors that was from socioeconomical background, actually not really, but was at least, I still have someone there who says, you want to talk just about tactics, but why don't you connect it to socioeconomic? Well, because historians of socioeconomics have, or history of economics shall learn the fact that if they think their field is so important that there is another one that is at least equally important, that is the one of military history, that has been dramatically less studied in the West, and for those specific historical reasons, so that the socioeconomical approach is not more or less important than another one, but it's just, if you're focused with that, it's fine, we need you, but we need also lots of other people. So I do my own, that is naturally influenced at this point, especially largely by the Clausewitzian theory that had very important idealistic basis, as you know, but also shows you pretty clearly how it doesn't buy fundamentally idealism as the key of an understanding, but surely identifies in the concept of moral forces what this connection with reality that at the end of the day is what we put in motion, right? As far as human societies are concerned, politics, war, armies are not to be found in nature, right? We created them, we invented them. There are comparisons you can trace with the rest of the animal world, but it's not war. It's something very different, right? In the way that animals fight, and even in organized forms, and the way humans do, right? There are much greater implications in there that cannot be easily even covered in a video. Maybe one day we will do it. There are pretty interesting things. When I was a kid, was obsessed by ants, right? And ants wars, right? I remember I read, like, when I was 7, it was like a major scholar work on the thing. I don't know how much I understood about it, but actually I was so fascinated, and surely I must confess that even my military historical interests were fueled enormously by that by those reads, that it's specific interest, passion slash obsession, right? And that gives you an idea, a pretty good example how it's fundamentally an ideal reason for which I began that. Think about your mind. Think about all the potential that you have, all what you can do, all the difference you can make. This has nothing to do with the fact that there are material limitations, because the point for you to reason like that, also from an evolutionistic point of view, is exactly that we are designed to break through the material world, through our impulses, through whatever moves us that, once again, we have no clear idea of, right? We really don't know. And even if we can't study how it happens, and we just can't know so much about the mechanics of it, but the deeper point is that it doesn't matter how analytical we can be. What is extraordinary of humans is this synthesis capability that definitely passes through the idea, right? It doesn't pass through our, I don't know, muscular capacities or our physical dimension. It's fundamentally a mental thing. So it all starts from there. And when I speak of moral resources, and I will be doing it a lot, and I say it especially for those who have subscribed recently and that have maybe not listened to me in these things, is that, unfortunately, there is something that happened in the West, that we had beautiful vocabulary with beautiful etymologies that date back even to thousands of years ago. But modern language, and I say very modern language, that is, it can't be the last 2 or 3 generations, have basically twisted its meaning, right? Moral doesn't mean, when I say the term moral forces, and it's a Clausewitzian term, but, moral doesn't mean, the preacher that, makes you the moral about what you have to do on Sunday. This is actually all that pertains to the spirit broadly meant, right? It's the same way, but how this tells you how the weird turns and irrational ones, actually the language turns. We use the term morale for the army. That at that point is much more is also connected, but it's not the whole picture of what we mean by moral forces. But it gives you the idea that it can be the morale that is boosted by things that are not clearly, not scientifically producible, right? The morale can be connected to so many things at once that at least all those who use the term and think, concentrate on, the reason of how that can be boosted, realize that the inherent complexity of. That is a good way to start addressing reality, to also appropriate ourselves of the correct etymological meaning. I mean, moral comes from, obviously, from the Latin mos, the mores, so the morals properly. That is something that we cannot really translate from Latin in the term the Romans used them, but it has to do with a way of life, with certain values that are intrinsic to the person and reflect actually or of a culture that let's not digress now on thing, but that however are crucial evidently in the way of life itself, in the behavior, in the responsibility, in a world, by the way, where individual responsibility was dramatically higher than the one we know today, right? That's also another thing we have to accomplish in this regard, that we got so passive, even intellectually speaking, that even from an intellectual point of view, our debate is mostly about a very easily understandable psychological mechanism. That is, I sediment a bunch of information. I think that defines me in a way. I meet someone who has a different idea from mine, which I do not understand. Therefore, I feel the need to affirm myself, to try to say this is not true, and then contrast happens, struggle happens. That even if I didn't realize that happened instinctively, because I needed to because that's the only way to actually learn something more and unexpected. And eventually, if that happens an enough number of times, a satisfactory number of times, I will probably acquire the realization that it's not just about the quantity of information or the pasted and copy stuff I can find on the internet as a definition to use here and there, but there is actually a process, a mechanism, and that can give me enough confidence to evaluate certain things without having a specific scientific proof of them, right? And that's also where the thing gets controversial, because we also live in a world, in fact, in which people do not even sediment those informations, but maybe they've been just indoctrinated from whichever background, and I really mean whichever, because there is no social, there is no personal background that is immune from that, right? It doesn't matter if you're left or right, theist or atheist. There is a margin for indoctrination everywhere, and even in there, it doesn't much depend even on the ideas themselves. I mean, on the specific, they're not decisive, right? Being left or right or theist or atheist, just saying the most, at least some of the most debated things, by themselves, they're not decisive, right? We're not all alike. It doesn't have function like that. You're defined by an enormous amount of stuff that sometimes you don't even realize. I don't think I always advise is, try to make your own history. I don't know if you ever thought about it. It's a bit of self-psychoanalysis. Okay, I know psychoanalysis doesn't work anymore for real, because we went past that. But in terms still of those moral forces, understanding why, for example, you behave in a certain way, right, is definitely important. Right, it's something you started doing since an early age, but the way, especially your adulthood, as far as it happened to me, I self-discovered certain things about me. Look at your family background, especially your parents. Your parents are fundamental figures. It tells you so much about you, and knowing that makes you extremely more effective as an individual. It can sound strange. You can't maybe understand even what's the mechanics of it. I mean, you could even explain it, because if you think about it, it's not so strange after all. But the fact that it's not so strange is something that we mostly sense as humans, when we experience the same things, and we are able to sympathize and to empathize and say, yeah, I get what you mean, even though we do not have the 100% security that is the case, but we still think it's likely, and the reason why we think it's likely is worth an analysis. So we also live in times, and I don't want to even imagine in this next year all the possibly the useless debates that will be about certain issues in our world now, that will remanifest prepotently the idea of how much we need to be guided, or how much we need to essentially do whatever we like, because there is always a balance between the two things, and it's never either one direction or the other. And it's in fact also a pity that politics takes just these two directions without saying, okay, well, let's not be dogmatic, let's stay in the middle and just adjust the situation according to what we can prove as far as our means afford us to be better or worse. And this is the problem I would like to, on a media now, I have with just, 3,000 subscribers, not that I am admonishing the world, but, I think this is always an actual topic, and it remains like that for also those who will come next, maybe will like to re-listen to this for whichever reason, is we live in a world of irrationality, right? And this irrationality, many times, if not most of the times, if you have a certain anthropological view, that just by cultural background in the West we should pretty much understand, and instead we are losing at that point, at some point, and I don't like at all. I think it's very dangerous. Is that there are this irrationality is malevolent, right? It's not just a mistake, right? It's a mistake because your intentions were wrong, right? Because if you're not sure, you're not certain, you cannot take in the first place. This is also impossible because everything we do is a take, and consequently a mistake, because we, as we were saying before, we cannot have the full certainty. We do not know the truth. about everything. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that every time you get to that take, it's a mistake, and therefore you can improve it. This is something that people do not like to hear, right? Because to a conspiracy theorist, that really I like as a term more than a maybe a conspirator would be better, or a plotter or whatever, but it truly fits the paranoid mindset of, I presume, the greatest part of the population, our own included, everybody's included, right? I often get into these things myself, like, instinctively speaking, right? There is always a part of our primitive selves that tell us, watch out, this may be a trap, right? You could be fascinated with the idea, but you could be fooled to rely on your primitive instincts. It's either left or right, or black or white, and that's where you should get to. Well, the point is that this thing is so seducing, as much as you do not are not acquainted enough with the complexity of reality. That's the real problem, and that's why we study history, because if you wonder why there are so many people who really live in a world that they feel it's almost it's fascinating. It's like looking at even at the past, right? You have these forces that look like this big entities that rule, that conceal themselves. It's kind of a primitivistic approach. It really stems from the same mechanisms, psychologically speaking, that our ancestors had back in the day. It's just adapted to the reality we know approximately in our own times, that are definitely pretty different from those ones. There are times that, by the way, are updating ever faster and are doing so because the world is ever more complex, is ever larger. I mean, quantitatively speaking, even our power is greater, right? Let's leave aside the ratio, authority, individual, but just think about how much the individual can do today that back in the day couldn't, because back in the day you just had to work all your day in the field. If you didn't do that, you would starve to death, or you would starve to death anyway, and therefore you had much different things to think about. But think about what, for example, we are doing here, right? I'm making these videos, you're following them, you're watching them, you're liking them, you're commenting, you're sharing, you're creating. We have created a community. That is something that if I had just sat there and done something else, maybe even more productive in my life with my own benefit, would have never happened. Like lots of things I told you many times, there have people who have written me and said, I began to study the history university because then I moved to this place. You realize you have changed, as we all do in everyday life, an entire person existence, right? And this is the power that we have always had, but that today, in the complexity of the world that surrounds us, is much greater. It's much larger. It's something that we had never experienced before. And in strictly economical terms, given that we're also facing, not so prosperous times because of this pandemics and all what the problem this entails, consider that even though there are definitely more or less advantageous solutions, and that if you have been working up to the day before in a way towards the you cannot reinvent yourself, there is so much, etc. But never underestimate, never fall into the end of history illusion. That's your track, and that's how you're going to remain. But realize that also, historically speaking, those who made it, right, were those who in a sense won the lottery. Won the lottery were a very few people, but that objectively maybe they were not they were not geniuses properly meant, but realized what's a genius anyway. It was an intelligent person. We could give an empirical definition of that at some point. Spotted something that to us now maybe seems ridiculous in terms of banality or simplicity or clarity. I actually wanted to talk about it given we were discussing World War I strategies and tactics at some point, but that nobody had ever thought of, right? And we're talking sometimes very big stuff historically speaking, right? If Columbus had not been a crazy completely inept in the reconstruction of classical sources of geography, etc., he would have never convinced himself that the Indies were so damn close, and that and he would have never had the motivation to actually get there and change the world. For somebody would have done it in his place at that point, but doing the thing that he has done, and literally changed the history of the war forever. So much that he still, he died thinking to have going to Asia. He didn't even know that he had, say, been discovered another continent. From those times perspective, and the question in there tells you what is that made the difference. Well, the difference is that the guy, we actually made a video on Columbus, I don't remember when, if it was last summer, I don't remember, but it was interesting because that was a guy who literally went against the dispute with the University of Salamanca. There were actually many political reasons for it, but those scholars had actually a much better understanding of geography at that point. They were actually right. He was wrong. He miscalculated the thing, but he actually did the freaking thing. And he did that risking his own life. We're talking about an Atlantic journey with those, stinky caravels. I don't know if you've ever seen a caravel, though. They're traps, right? They're cabinets. They're not ships. They're a freaking thing. Those people had the guts to cross the Atlantic with the motivation of what, at the end of the day? Of the motivation of a medieval man that essentially believed, of course, he wanted to get rich unscrupulously and all those stuff. But he believed also in this idea of crusade. He had this view of the world. Things that today we would consider as unacceptable, for example, for our moral standards, and that we wouldn't make an effort to understand, which instead would be very interesting and fascinating, and that's why there are so many people that just talk about these topics. We don't even know what the wall deal was about, and make it a stupid political point, just criticizing the thing, or thinking that is just because of the Native Americans, or an Italian American festivity, or thing. No, there is an actual story that go study that from the sources and realize what Columbus freaking did, and shut up otherwise, right? And the interesting thing is the motivation of this all. That's what brings people to do. And since we're a military history channel, we are realizing day after day, as you know, we're no culturalists, and we do not make culturalist content, because that's freaking wrong. It has nothing to do with the history of warfare in the way we scientifically can study, even if there are prominent scholars who think otherwise, but they're wrong. And this is the only thing I can actually tell to trust me about, because I never ask you to trust me, right? But the question, we actually talked about it, so I kind of, showed you what's the deal is. But if you never had watched those videos, or you don't know what I'm talking about, just consider very seriously this thing, always to understand it on your own. Don't trust me, in the sense of believing blindly what I say, which I presume you're of course intelligent enough not to do. But, it's one of those things that are so clear, right? And there are also the actual demonstration that it's that easy sometimes to correct even important things, and carving your own space within these mistakes sometimes. Yes, humanity improved, also exploiting each other's faults, weaknesses, and shortcomings, because at the end of the day, that's also what competition is, and so on. But that's the point. It's much easier than it sounds. So that every time you meet someone who says, history is not important, who cares to know what Napoleon did? It's 200 years ago, who cares? And the point is, that person has already lost, right? Historically speaking, the possibility of that person to be a better one, right? It can't be, I don't know, maybe that person is fanatic or something else, right? Maybe thinks that economics is all that matters in life. That's a partial of it. It's just like a person who thinks that it's plenty of historians like that behave like that too. In their own way. I've met so many scholars that they just knew their own thing, because legitimately they had specialized in that, but they had closed themselves to the idea that what they were what they were saying before was not the only thing, right? I must say, as a medievalist, but also as a historian broadly meant, it's a bit our own categories specifically are very flexible, very easygoing, right? We tend to be open. Also, have you ever wondered why history is this no based ground thing mostly, right? It's so complex that at this point we realize that being fanatic, dogmatic, to create a current or whatever is just fictitious. We distrust each other by by job, and that's the best thing we can do, right? Because we really want to see clearly and think ourselves and so on. But the Middle Ages perhaps even more, because the Middle Ages is like there's no state, there's no comparable reality, for example, from a political social point of view, to the one we live now, right? A modernist, a contemporaneous thinks in a completely different way. Also an anarchist. Medievalists are consistently more open to the idea that things can change much more fluidly, but that at the same time there is a much more similar substratum that we can analyze, and we can ground base our ideas. And so history is a medicine. I'd like to say it like that, right? If you wonder what you can do to cure the world at so many levels, is to make it the favor of making stop to believe blindly or dogmatically in what they do. This has nothing to do with, for example, with religion, right? I've never thought, for example, that religion is an impediment. There are people who get trapped by, scientific thought in a way that is, of course, anti-scientific, right? People just choose. It's like what Nietzsche said, well, once you have killed God, do not substitute it with another God, right? It's the same exact thing. What we believe, also in religious terms, is in terms of matter of responsibility, because I think if there is a God, that's the only possible scenario you would like to believe in, right? And that's why I never even told you whether I believe in or not. But the question is, you want to believe in something that gives you the opportunity of making your own difference in this world, because otherwise, what would be this all about, right? And therefore, it's a constant search. It never stops. It's never. If you read the Bible, you perfectly know how beautifully and rightfully ambiguous it is. I mean, it never. It's not just. Let's leave aside the sheer historical and literary stratification, construction of the work, and so on. But in general, just for those who composed it, the broader. You can easily look even just at the New Testament if it's easier for you, but the Old Testament is exactly the same at that level. It's about you making a choice, not find the idea of the struggle. What does Israel mean? It means struggle with God. I mean, the idea that the most favored chosen people actually is not meant to blindly obey, but to struggle, to have a problem in saying, of course God wins at the end, but the question is that those wouldn't be the chosen ones if they hadn't made that struggle. And this is probably one of the single most proper, spot-on, scientifically, anthropologically coherent and consistent and actual and real acknowledgments of the history of civilization. Of course, the history of religions is a constant realization, aside from whatever the last 3 centuries, fanaticistic dogmas have tried to substitute to themselves, to the fact that humans have always known the thing all along, right? That if you read works written through, a few thousands of years ago, were the same exact things we still do today. And the worst about this is that those things are written and they're there from thousands of years, and we have kept writing a lot of stuff up to this point, and still people to this point do not even read, right? They do not even know that they exist, and they just feel better or worse at thinking that that's just obscurantism, or that's just the pure enlightenment of the you can imagine. People, yes, let's be honest about it. I know it sounds kind of elitistic or contemptuous and so on, but the wide majority of people, and I put myself in this too, because I could say the wide majority of humanity, looking at even single individuals, is stupid. We are fundamentally stupid. People are largely, overwhelmingly stupid. They do not understand anything of the world they live in. We don't. We do not, right? We are not even properly meant to do so. People do not know anything about the history. They do not know anything about their own country. They do not know anything about themselves. They do not know, and they have never known. This is the beauty of it, right? That at the end of the day, those who wrote those things that became the classics, etc., that are also things that, if they survive, it's not because they were the only things that were written, but because it was plenty of them even at the time, and not everything was written, by the way, as you know, but they have survived because they actually had something to say. It was pretty damn consistent, right? And those things should be read. People should grow up, right? And the interesting thing is that at the time, the people who could write the stuff were really privileged in the sense that that there was the aristocrat, and then thousands of people breaking their backs for making it do the stuff that it did. That once again were not parasitic stuff. This is the other classist myth that we have, being bothered with, is that the rich guys at the top, or no, the rich guys at the top are mostly some of the most intelligent and capable and industrious people of humanity in the history of mankind, right? The history of mankind is never made by the people properly meant. It's always been made by those who had the capacity, the intelligence, the means to do things. It can be even the people sometimes, but not most of the times, right? Never think that the revolutions of the 18th century were the people doing. No, it was just a restricted elite, the upper middle classes that had risen through wealth and power and had also given work to other people, and that also those who were at the top were cooperating with, and that could make the thing, right? It's never the people. The people, as normally, has always been the least resourceful, the least interesting, the least intelligent part of the population, and it's meant to be so because you need people who also make the thing done. Unfortunately, so in today's times, the people has reversed in terms of, before everybody at least worked seriously. They were all peasants. Today, it's not like that, but we've just switched this ratio, right? And the point is that we're in the first century where this happened. We have not enough education delivered to everybody, right? Because our education is still thought essentially for the one of mass times, right? Where the majority of people was not schooled, and you had to school them, right? It was just the essentials. Now we have to take a step forward and say, we don't have to let kids do whatever the freak they want. Like, of course, we have to leave them autonomy to do what they like, to cultivate their interests. But those formulas, so let's stop doing homework because they do not work. Now, the fact that the homeworks in the educational system sometimes do not work is because the educational systems do not work, right? It's a broader political and social issue. It's not because homework. What kids need is a shitload of theory and a shitload of practice, and they should be, pressured as much as their psyche holds to be actually to become intelligent people for real, right? The myth that a healthy human person cannot learn more than much because otherwise gets stressed is complete bullshit, right? It's just a lazy person that back 80 years ago would have been immediately castigated and disciplined and would have learned the damn thing, right? And we should do the same exact thing, because everything that lazy person doesn't learn is something we'll have to pay all collectively in the future, right? So we can all do freaking better, and we have always had this possibility. It's just that today we have it an excruciatingly greater much than we have ever had in the history of mankind, right? So there is no excuse of any kind. We have to learn and learn and learn and learn and never stop. So these are attitudes like, I don't need to know, right? I don't need to inform myself. I don't need to, which doesn't mean you have to buy, a library on your own. But I mean, we can't say all knowledge is a click away, right? From you. Even in there, you have to be cautious. I can't open all these parentheses on let's say how to read the content I make here, what it's supposed to be. As I told you before, Schwerpunkt is a small channel, so it doesn't have any, I feel the responsibility, even if you're just, 208, 800, whatever. I wonder what the hell I can't say to this number of people to be useful, right? Uh, I I do, I really do, and I pose myself the problem. So everything I do in here, even when I exceed, like the aforementioned things, it's because I think it can make a difference, right? And you have proven me that it can, because you are the ones who eventually do it, and that's exactly what I'm trying to say now. That my contents are always designed to be precisely aimed, right? I can't talk of course, more or less about historical realities. You may wonder what you care um, specifically about. Uh, and I see there are certain things you like more, you like less. But the question, even in there, is why are you here for? Right? Of course, we all have our own reasons, and even in here, it's unthinkable to homogenize the thing. But it's obvious that if you follow a content that is substantially made from by the same person in this kind of uh, artisanal way, without much of a refinement and so on, it's because evidently you like the spring of this to be more or less consistent with the content he produces, right? And that's why I do it, because yeah, I do think I have something to say which is not clamorous, it's not genial, it's not over the top this great thing, but I think it can be useful. This is what has always guided me. That if I could do something that could help someone, well, if I make it, even for just one person, even if it's a small thing that I actually accomplished, that has made my day. Right? I feel like I've been useful in some fashion. Of course, I think I do more than this, so that there is also a cost-benefit ratio. But I would, given the potential of certain content, think about the von Clausewitz series, the von Kriege. That is something that people do not watch generally, and yet I'll keep doing it because I believe that even if at the moment it's just lost time, in the future it may actually become, and I see, as I see it right now, actually the most important part of the channel, right? And if exactly because I see there is a distance, difference, there is something in between that still doesn't, it doesn't has not bridged. Let's say the gap is not filled in there. That's exactly why I keep proposing that, right? Because I think it's not worth it, but because I'm simply commenting from Clausewitz. So even if I suck maybe at commenting it, but still at least I read the thing and we analyze it. So it's not my own thing. It's von Clausewitz's thing. I'm just a medium, right? And I quite unfortunately do this, but at the same time, since nobody has ever done it on YouTube, so why not, right? If you make a tour, that's something I also promise you to do every once in a while, to make a tour on YouTube videos and reading comments and randomly, let's say criticizing them for better or for worse, right? Not necessarily because we're searching for the negative stuff, but to make you realize sometimes how easily certain attitudes, certain mistakes that may even get very popular can be framed and can be corrected, can be, at least in your own perspective. It's not that you're going to have to enforce that on anyone, but technically that's what we all do at the end of the day, right? We also have this sometimes libertarian philosophy that I can tell you I passed through that phase as well, but I've never ceased even for a second. That's why I actually comment to von Kriege that being a libertarian is just a shell from which you can't say everybody thinks whatever they want, so that you have this dramatic trust in your neighbor. Do you? I don't think you should have. I mean, you should have trust in your neighbor as far as humans are concerned, but it's not that if you leave people free to do what they want, that's actually a good thing. Right? A way of coercing others can actually be beneficial to all of them. Right? It's just they have different ideas, and that's why we study on Schwerpunkt. We essentially make a political and military history, because at the end of the day, what we observe is always this back and forth between not really having two parties that are diametrically opposed, this dichotomy, which is the great illusion of humanity, right? That there is really a left or a right, right? That there is really a black or a white. That's an illusion, right? I'm thinking I have just right it in front of me on the dashboard. The last video I made on Philip of Swabia and the rise of Otto Brunswick. That is quite fascinating because of that mess that early 13th century Germany was. It shows you pretty damn well, in my opinion, how they were all essentially pursuing the same policy and that they just behaved otherwise when someone got to the place they wanted to get, so they had to row backwards and against them and then eventually take power in their own place where they could. And it's always been the same thing. And the fascinating aspect of this is that there is a positive, a really a positive point, right? Of course, things can't go dramatically bad downhill. There's no true progress as we intended, but really humans tend to do things that they want to make work for good and for in a positive sense, right? Even the myth that there is fundamentally an evil guy that takes over, if you interpret it, this is also an interesting reading of my content, if you ever wonder how I reason. This idea that, in fact, I can't say I ever believed properly in the past, nor even what I was. I'd never been properly libertarian myself. But the idea that whenever there is someone who imposes an authority, there is a worsening in social conditions. Basically, you see that the entire history of civilization passed through the creation of a stronger authority. And this has not to do with the democraticness of it. I mean, it could have been really a democratic thing, it might have been not. But the question is that when you have to make things done, you do need to impose the thing. You can do it in the worst ways. You can cause genocides. You can't be something criminal. You really need to stop. But the question is that humans tendentially work through hierarchies, and there is nothing to do with that, right? The idea of being completely free in history equates to be free to do whatever the heck you like. Right, that's why so many kids today think about that the great empires are the terrible evil, like the Nazis of the ancient world, and the tribes are the pure and free that never harmed anyone. Those were fundamentally all a bunch of criminals that basically were all involved exactly in the same systematic enslavement of their own people, continuous massacre, destruction of other people's cultures, as it's always been, as every single power from the ecumenic empires from the smallest tribe has ever done in the same exact way. And you can argue that maybe the ecumenic empire brought something a tiny more to it, maybe a tip of the iceberg, that cumulating has made something work in terms of something called civilization, while the smaller ones had naturally their own limits, also contributing their own way, because at the end of the day we all pass through hunter-gatherers, through tribes, to those systems that. So that's the proof that we actually improve over time, right? It's just not given for granted we'll succeed, but tendentially we have that pulsion. And we have to be dramatically clear about these topics, because once again, it's not me telling you the story of the little, sovereign that did that or fought that battle in that year or whatever. It's actually trying to find a pattern in there and to explain the thing, which is a risk as well, methodologically speaking. Many people like to find a pattern just to be definitive about it. Even in here, it's not the case. Here, it's finding a pattern to realize how this changes all the time. That the pattern can be there, but it's not a prescriptive one. And this is also what the Clausewitzian theory is about, fundamentally. There are a beautiful quote that we're reading today, but I should find it, tell you at some point, that how people effectively stop. I mean, they fail to realize, even in front of a theorist like von Clausewitz, what the actual content is about, or the actual use is about, the actual good is about, because they do not even read it. Right? Reading, studying, and understanding a text are three completely different things. I mean, they're connected, of course, but they're different. It's not that if you read your entire life, you actually understand more than another person. You have to make a qualitative struggle within the thing that most people just don't do. Right? Reading, some fiction or even history under the shade in summer when you're thinking about, past, girls in bikini in front of you, just raise your look, go eat an ice cream. It's not a struggle, right? It can't be pleasant. I give you that. I know I know how it is, but it doesn't make it done, right? You can't look like an intellectual who want to hit up some, So, I've always been, thinking now the sexual stuff. But let's say, you understand what I mean, because that's also actually the valid motivation for everything at the end of the day. But the question is properly that achieving something costs, and nobody likes this, right? And it's normal. But once you understand that this is the case, if you are an intelligent person, you also understand that, yes, you have to struggle to accomplish something. And once you accomplish it, you're freaking ahead. Right? What do you prefer in your life? To be happy or to have accomplished something? To have been happy or to have accomplished? Let's leave aside the, what does happiness ever mean at the end of the day. But I would easily choose to have accomplished something, not to be happy. Why would I need that? Right? What would being happy bring me to improve myself? And what's happiness at the end of the day? Philosophically, I mean, I know that the answer is silly because happiness doesn't quite exist in the mean we intended. So it's obvious that we want to, that the purpose of life is to accomplish something, right? Empirically, but I mean, we understand it empirically. But the question is, why don't we do it? Because we're lazy, because we're weak, because we're spoiled. In a nutshell, because there is nothing heroic or romantic or, special about us. As we were saying before, the majority of individuals is completely uninteresting. And that's why people who make efforts are objectively more interesting. And you know why? Because sometimes I wonder it. Right? We all make efforts. So, for example, for what I do on Schwerpunkt, I don't think I'm doing this dramatic effort. As we're telling you at the beginning, I do it just because I can. Doesn't require so much. But objectively, to have put all this stuff out there has required some commitment. And I think that a part of the reason why I have you as my subscribers is that you probably wonder, what's this crazy guy talking about, right? Why does he do it, right? What's about him that makes him do it? What can I spot that, maybe, I'm interested in, not even because maybe not because I'm interested in being like him or doing the same stuff, but just knowing, what's the thing that maybe could turn useful in my own case. These are the things. This is the kind of videos when I express the stuff. It's only in this Lorraine playlist. That is properly, that I named like that exactly to stress the concept of research. The fact that this is not the entertainmental content that I just submit to you to tell the small story. Hell, I talk for 2 hours in a row. You're surely not there for it. There's plenty of other channels, but much more successful one at that point. I have no ambition in that regard. But the question is exactly understanding the connection between historical content and this kind of content, or the phone closets one, for example, they're more theoretical. And I would tell you this, that as it happens normally to, as it happened to me also when very few times, honestly, that I ever followed a YouTuber, I think it happened just twice or thrice, I mean, in a consistent sense, is that when you understand it, Link, it means you have reached what you were searching for, right? You have a right to the point, and you know how to integrate what I say, what you can understand, and therefore you will just use my content, let's say, in an instrumental sense, right? In a functional sense, for what you have to do actively, purposely. Then that's the moment in which you have accomplished something, and that's the same reason why I began to make this videos. In the beginning, it was like a discussion I had, if I leave up here certain content that is kind of embarrassing because it's like I spoke even worse than I do now, and I didn't even have a synopsis. Hell, I don't even have it now, but it's still somewhat better, and yet those are that is the content that still makes more views. Okay, they arrived earlier, so I had more time to sediment views and therefore to enter the YouTube algorithm. That I'm still, never fully committed to understanding how it works, but I think it's too intuitive. And I think it's just, making the video that you like is the best strategy at that point. But the question here is, why do people keep watching that, aside from other aspects of YouTube algorithm that obviously do not expose certain other materialities far better, and that keeps being watched, is a mystery to me, as most things in my life. And yet I accept it, and I use it instrumentally, and I keep watching the damn thing. Maybe they watch it because it's painful, in a sense, or maybe because I don't know. There are multiple reasons, honestly, considering the content, specifically the topic of those videos. But this is not the right video to discuss that. But just for saying that, eventually that makes the channel expand, and if it does, it's because they slowly start getting acquainted to my other content. They appreciate maybe something, and you evidently do. I mean, I'm talking to you because you are the ones who follow this thing. So what is the point I want to make for this new year? I confess to you that I began this evening. I make this video because I feel a bit down for pragmatic reasons that I cannot explain right now. I feel blessed by certain others that happened to me recently, and that's exactly why I want to make so well in the future, in the near future. And this pandemic thing is frustrating me a lot because of it, and it's no excuse, and that's exactly the point. I mean, I still want to do certain things, to go abroad. I hope that we will make Schwerpunkt fit with that at some point, because I will have to explain you careful what this whole thing is about, and I hope it doesn't fail, because if it fails, I think I will give up a lot of things, right? Perhaps not Schwerpunkt, but I will die. A part of me will die inside, or will totally die. I don't know, honestly. And I'm being mysterious, but if you've listened maybe some video made some time ago, you understand what I'm talking about, and you will, I don't know. And I came here to give a simple note, I could say it an advice, but I'm not so pretentious at the end of the day. That is, since we are all here together, and we are working together for what we think things could go better, the advice I give myself, at least, is, of course, to never give up. Right? There is this phrase that has led me throughout my life that, as I told you before, has been dramatically easy, but it took a toll sometimes, and not, irrelevant one. And when you feel down because you sense the uncertainty of what lays ahead, right? It can be, I don't have to tell you, I mean, we all know what this is about. With the pandemic, this has become all way more evident for all the consequences that it has brought. But there is, I think, a beauty, right? A deep reason, something that goes beyond, even properly the reason that we're calling for so much. And if I talk about moral sources, this is exactly the point. That makes us feel better, in a sense, right? We can't feel worse. The world can appear as worse. But it's in that moment that we are given an opportunity to shine, right? It can be
yeah, it's twisted in a sense because it's finding yourself in moments of trouble and wishing you had never been there. The things had gone way more smoothly, and that they will go hopefully at some point. But it's realizing that if this life, which is dramatically short, is worth being lived, it is exactly for moments like these to prove that doesn't matter how hard the world comes at us, but we can take the blow and stand at our ground and to strike back. And this is no, I mean, not to the poor world. At the end of the day, it works on its own without really caring about you or not. But I mean, the adversities broadly meant the ones that we create as such, right? Because we are ambitious. We want things. We need things. We've seen it before. It's instinctive. It's something that defines us, and it's exactly struggling for them that gives us an edge, right? That it makes us things done, right? If we weren't pressured, if we hadn't problems, if we weren't in trouble, in peril, if we didn't have something to lose, um, um, we we wouldn't truly understand the fullest. And there is this, as you understand, is very valid. It's very relatable for everybody. So that's why I'm bringing this up. But doing your best and learning how to suffer sometimes is something that we do in everyday life. Sometimes it's harder, right? It's in those times that you see all these stories of war, of violence, of death. I mean, you're talking about the worst thing humanity can face. I mean, military history teaches you so brutally that a man can go through such things alive. Maybe not, in the bed, not maybe improved in the sense that, unfortunately, people break. So I can't tell you but to wish you good luck because I know that the world is not just made of happy endings. There is something I hope we can learn from this world that maybe also the West in the past generations has habituated a bit to itself too much. Is that not only things, not all things end well, but that properly things never end until the end. And secondly, that we may need way more things not to end well for ourselves that to end well. And that's what I was saying before, right? What do you wish to be? Do you wish to be happy or do you wish to be accomplished? Because they are two different things, right? They are, I mean, accomplished also not understood by social standards, but to actually do things that you feel you need to do, and the purpose of doing. That's particularly important, and you do not forget about those easily, right? You don't when you wake up in the morning, you need to do. You need to see. You need to think of what's the step you're taking uh, before the next time you will be waking up in that way, if you will, right? And that is the true answer. It's doing. It's not speculating. It's not being content with fewer, right? There is also the sense that you know I will accept. Of course, as we were saying before, every person has his or own breaking point, right? There is a soil of tolerance that it's different. It's like a soil of pain, or we all change in that sense. But there are objectively people who accomplish more, people who accomplish less, right? And people who accomplish more pay for it, right? They're not. I mean, there are those that do it with creating damage to others for no unjustly, right? Justice is another deal that we'll have to speak at that point. But even in here, actually doing more gives you a way better sense of what is to be done in that sense, in that regard as well. It's just what is unjust. And the beauty of it is that you decide how it is like, right? And this has nothing to do with the absolute of what we do not know, what's beyond. We just know we have this faculty, and that as harsh as things may sound, sometimes even doing something hard is at the end of the day the best. The best. And this is the empathic thing, is never to give up, in my opinion. Of course, we constantly give up about many things, but here we're talking about the individual accomplishments naturally. But here we're talking about something that goes beyond the the single aspect. It's about life itself. It's about not giving up because things are keeping to come. We are not immortal. We are here because we preserve ourselves from from whatever happens in the world that at the end will make us end. That's our destiny. That's what we're meant to be, right? And life has a meaning because it gets defined exactly by this. So living a sheltered life when you presume that it's just having your stuff to to chew in front of Netflix and getting obsessively connected to Facebook or Instagram is and just having that minimal money that will allow you to keep surviving for an indefinite time it's probably not much of a human accomplishment, right? It's actually pretty bad. Let's be honest about it. There is no, I mean, it can be an accomplishment to accomplish that if if you came from a worse situation. I give you that, but the human potential, even in acceptable terms by average standard, is definitely much greater than that, right? It's not even wishing. This is not about wishing people to be perfectionists, to be superhumans, to do who knows what. Superhumans do not exist. They have never existed historically. I mean, there are just humans in the same way we've ever been that that did things that, however, looking at history can show us how far we can go, and that we do not seem to have appreciated enough in this sense for the sake of our own accomplishment as individuals. It's a hard talk, right? It's you see, when we struggle and we have difficulties and we finally make it to the shore, we could say like that, and we feel safe in this harbor, and we think we maybe can lazy down a bit, that yeah, the struggle was hard. I mean, it's normal to immediately relax. I mean, it's just even a biological thing. I mean, you need that psychophysically to remain also stable and to recover energies. But as soon as you have recovered energy, as soon as you're sitting there and you're basically telling yourself, well, but maybe 1 second, more, one thing more, one game more, one chip more, yeah, 1 hour sleep more, 1 hour doing nothing more. That is not justified. It has nothing to do with you recovering strength for real. Is involved. Well, that's when, in my opinion, you should look at yourself and say, if I'm actually a human being, that the best I could do is yet to come. It's not that you have to put yourself in trouble once again to say, okay, then to eventually get out of it, right? Even though I must say humans tend to naturally do this as well, right? We know that we're not attracted at all by staticity. Like the human brain is attracted by chaos. That is to say, even if we had everything, we saw chaos in the distance, we would go towards the chaos. This is what science fundamentally has come, and this is pretty fascinating. And you wonder why. It's the same exact thing I'm telling you now. We're meant to be like that. So if you really want to make something, and in a moment like this, you think that, you feel down because you say, "Oh, now, what will be of me? What will be of me?" Right? Remember, in March, everybody freaked out. We all feared to die. In a sense, we knew it would have not been like that, but objectively, lots of people have died, and even though the majority has been old people with pre-existing diseases, hell, this is no thing to celebrate. It's not that it's good because it's sad. Okay, well, doesn't happen to it happens to the young people as well, by the way. But it's not the point. The point is, of course, the world has received a great blow that it's pretty damn serious, and uh, has it every one of us, right? I speak from, as I told you, as a person that actually had in November. I actually had it the end of October. We got it in our family. My grandmother died. We had the thing. I actually had it myself test. I don't know whether I have antibodies or not. If I got it, I was asymptomatic, as many people, fortunately at least, but I don't know. I felt weird at some point, but I don't know whether that was the thing or not. It was a very low, virulent charge, and I don't know what the thing there. But the question is, we know what it costed. There were investments have done it, and lost something. Fortunately, nothing because I invested very few. But I did this whole thing at a PhD that they actually, from that point, it went bad. But even in there, I wonder. I mean, it went well, but I wonder whether I morally deserved these. Maybe I didn't tell. I got 1 month extra and other 3 months, actually, or better. I had gotten 2 months from this summer, then I got other 3 months now, right? And I won with the scholarship, and I am the person who wonders. You see, in this thing, I could say, oh well, fine, I will get that. That is good also for my retirement pension. It's all paid. It's all cool. It's more time. Yeah, okay, but I wonder, did I deserve this? Like my work will get better, or did I need this money to compensate my life, or is there something I can't do? Can I be satisfied? Well, of course I can't be satisfied with that. I want to do so much, and every day I realize what I do so few. And this is to me a healthy mindset to start from. So my advice is to, at this time at least, not to literally go out there because you probably can't, but to, when it will be possible to go out there, but especially whether you go out or not, to do it, to do something, and to do it with the means you have. We all have what we have. That's all we have. Why wasting it, right? There are certain attitudes I will never understand. And that's why I can't understand a person who gives up. I can't, because I know how hard it can be, how much it can knock you down. But I will never understand a person that after having recovered gives up entirely. Unless there is some psychological trauma there. Unfortunately, many people give up truly, in the sense they suicide themselves. I saw people dead for that, and not so pleasantly. Literally, a person throwing himself out of the balcony, I don't know, from the 7th floor, something like that. Another guy hanging himself just next to my blocks. Not now, actually, it was several years ago. He looked like a puppet. It was actually a real hanged person, and from the in the street we couldn't distinguish it. But just for telling you that there is a lot of solitude, there's a lot of loneliness. I've always been a loner. I've never minded it by character, but I know there are many people who legitimately feel the lack of purpose. They just feel, we all do, right? Not to those extremes, but they say, what the hell am I doing this for? The answer is, you're doing this for because you still have something left. And it's hard to focus on what you have left when you have lost something great, right? So certain people do not pass the shock. I mean, they don't pass the shock. It's like comforting a person because he's lost someone dear, but you can't. We know that we can do something about it psychologically, but that there is literally a moment in which you can't help but feeling down or worse. And certain people do not make it because they, at that moment, even if they would have maybe recovered at some point, they couldn't take it, and they go, right? So that's the worst one can come to. And I give you that it's pretty pretty bad for as an expectation. But consider, if you ever feel down, that is a real scenario, that it happens every day, and that you have the luxury to be in a very different situation, and you're probably doing nothing, or at least surely you're never doing enough of what you can do. Right? So I won't be telling you that I make these videos because I think what else I'm doing, but at least I keep myself busy. Right? It can, if you ever feel about that, it's even a way to have made a day, to have spent a day having done something, right? And maybe the next day doing more, right? And strengthen yourself. It takes time, right? It takes discipline. It takes a toll. And there is also a roof that you can't surpass at the end of the day, because there is, if anything, a limit of time, of energies, and we have to stay to that as well. But it's almost pleasant to test yourself, right? Because it's all what you have. It's like you have a toy, right? You want to know what's the range of possible, how much you can, where do the rule can bring you, or where does the how better you can do about it. It's a test, and you're testing yourself, and it's possibly the most beautiful test ever, because through that you will understand so much about yourself and the world at the same time, that will have really improved your capacity. And I tell you because aside from many other experiences that brought me to realize this over time, and it's gradual, that is to say, I probably didn't do enough in my life, because otherwise I would feel dramatically more motivated, and I would feel things are being accomplished much more easily, or much more quickly. Excuse me, much more direct, and I would feel the exact connection. It's happened also with Schwerpunkt, right? It's happened because I realized that coming here every day, even if at some point I have to. Maybe I won't, I'm not going to have the same possibility of doing it, but I'll keep it happening as much as I can, because at the end of the day, it gives you a motive, right? Routine, we know routine, for example, has dramatic stabilizing psychological value, right? If you know what to do every day and capitalizing upon it, building over it, it's the best way you can do the thing. Naturally, there are also those who do not have the stable base, right? That's where the counter argument, you understand, is a bit conservative at the end of the day, even if I think I'm pretty balanced. But I do understand what does say that, yeah, I may be doing this, but at the same time, there is someone who's actively preventing me from doing better. Well, why? Do you think that there are, people to whom this doesn't happen? I mean, do you think, for example, in the current pandemics, that this isn't being someone's responsibility, or even our own responsibility, like to the guys who lied about the fact the pandemic was spreading in China for disgusting political reasons, killing people, taking out doctors, professionals, hiding, the actual numbers of the one thing that coming out right now, but even to yourself from the other side of the globe, that said, okay, well, I just have to go out, buy that thing. It takes 5 minutes, maybe, I don't know. I will not take all precautions because whoever, it's just 5 minutes, right? And that you're still responsible in part, right? So we all say multiply that for how many people are we? 6-7 billions. Do you think nobody is actually putting, you know, creating obstacles to us. We are constantly doing it, and that's the problem. We created them to ourselves, and it's not wise to flip the thing by saying, "Ah, you're just a privileged guy that had it easier." Well, you should be thankful someone had it easier. It can devote its time to stabilizing the situation, not to make a further mess, right? Of course, when he actually does, not when he uses that to do stupid things. But in a sense, we are all disadvantaged, right? We are all actively prevented by someone or something, just for the same fact that we are mortal, to do what we would like. So, not being too tough on each other, but to be constructive at least, to be the right amount of tough in as much that can help the person to grow is fine. But that's exactly the point. It's something that until you don't try, you will never fully know how far it can go, right? And you have to go out there and try. And once you have stabilized your situation, to take a next step it feels like a moral imperative, right? Because it's your life. And I don't know why today I came up with this, but speaking of moral forces, you understand what this all means. That it takes also motivation. I can tell you what is going to be your motive. Hell, not even von Clausewitz does, right? It can be everything. I pointed out a couple before, but the question is deeper, I presume. It has to do with the idea that there is a universal moral value that we can all look at and say, whatever I take this from my perspective and so on, it can actually be beneficial to me in a collective sense. That is, I personally presume, I believe honestly, that the better you treat yourself, it's not so automatic, but the greater, let's put it in this way, the greater the chances that the world will benefit from it, right? You can't do well to the world if you don't do good to yourself, right? And that's true. I mean, there are many people, for example, who give everything for the job, and then they're excellent, but then they treat the families. So I know personally people who are involved in charity and something, they don't even go help their sickly mothers when they're old, right? So it's how messed up human nature can get sometimes. But there are reasons, and I firmly believe that it's also trying to understand those reasons that makes the difference, and that's why we study history. Not for stigmatizing, not for having a moralistic take on it, but simply to, first of all, try to understand what it is, given that no person can even minimally come close to imagine to dare to think that he can understand a minimal part of history, even studying for a lifetime as a professional historian, right? And that should humble you down to make you realize that, yes, there is an infinite towards which we will never reach, but still the road we can make in our lifetime can accomplish a big deal for real, for people, for ourselves, for others, right? And therefore, for this year, given that I, of course, wish you the best. I wish you to succeed. I wish you to... But I cannot wish you and make it happen. Nobody can, right? We do it. We're all nice. Happy this, happy that. But do you really care? How much do we care about improving ourselves, right? That's another matter, right? And that starts from you. So the best thing I presume I can do is really literally giving that advice. Don't give up, right? Find within yourself the answers you need, because nobody can do it for you. Or even if they can, you should understand why it's the case, and that still requires your own understanding, because there is an authority in this world, and that authority is always wrong, but is also necessary, in respectively by some degree, right? So you can't reject it entirely. You can't also say it's the only thing we have to blindly follow. But the thing lays in the middle, and we have to learn to respect our own intelligence, realizing that there is no easy answer or sort, right? That the world is not dominated by an evil master that is trying to conceal itself behind everything. But there are a bunch, there are lots of of great bastards that make our lives dramatically bad. And they do pass sometimes also through the stereotypical thing of politics, of the media and stuff. But that that's just a part. If you focus just on it, just know you've already mistaken. And looking at yourself in the mirror and starting from yourself is a good reason to say, maybe if I make it to get it to some point, I can't really do the difference myself, and not waiting for something to happen, just increasing hatred and actually not accomplishing anything. Accomplishing something requires work, a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice. There's no other way out, right? So I vented a bit. I needed, honestly, to make this video today because I don't think I would have been, let's say, there is something that motivated me today to make this video. And I'm thankful for it because it's something that gives me discipline and worry every day. So that's a good point where to start. Be worried enough, but also be firm enough, right? Learn how to strengthen the tension between the two things, because it's only at that point you'll understand how much you can strengthen yourself in the process. Toughening up. And so again, I wish you an extraordinary 2021. Let's hope that we will make really a great job to fix the majority of the problems we're facing right now. We are doing, I think, by certain standards well, by certain standards bad, but still we have been accomplishing something, and that's important. It's something we had to start from to improve. And I hope everything is gonna be well for you, for your dear ones, and I'm sure that you can make it. I'm sure that you individually can make the difference in this world, because we all can, right? And sometimes it just takes us to realize what it is, how it is that we have actually done, and how much we mean and we can be worth if we only take a chance to demonstrate it to ourselves. So never give up. This is my thing. Never give up. Right? We're not here for giving up. Right? We could all give up and we stay here. There is a reason why we stay here. We didn't go. Right? As far as we are here, let's not give up. Let's not give up. Alright. So I wish you again a happy new year. Thank you for listening to this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. And for now, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.